So where the challenge came in was when I gave them a list of some of the topics that I was planning to cover, and asked them which were most closely related to their interests. And what we see in the slide that you're going to see in a second is that they had a clear preference for issues around how media had affected social relationships, and particularly around issues of gendered identities. And one of the things that they were less interested in, or expressed less of an interest in initially, was political communication, I guess with a capital P and a capital C. Why was this an issue at the time? Well, this was an issue at the time because some of the things that were going on around the world at the time. Some of the research that I do is about the use of social media and the rise of extremism. One can hardly ignore the fact that the Trump presidency has raised some very interesting ideas about how questions about the connections between centralized media industries and political power have become incredibly important. There's been 30 years of research on the rise of political celebrity and how political celebrity has really affected governance and democracy. And one could hardly do a unit called Contemporary Debates in the Media, which is what the unit is called, without accessing that. So my challenge was to combine those two things. And how I did it in my teaching was as I'm not sure that luck is quite the right word to have it, but the Brett Kavanaugh hearings happened right in the middle of the teaching. And so I used that to do a session and do some teaching about how those issues come together, about how gender and the media becomes a political issue in terms of the impact of gender on politics proper. I was also able to do some neat things like talk about the history of the topic, the intersections between Kavanaugh and the Clarence Thomas hearings of the late 1990s, and to provide a way of talking about how contemporary debates about gender in the media that quite often circulate around social media and images of women and so on and so forth, people were talking about those a quarter of a century ago. And there are some things that we can learn from that that can help us understand some of the things that are happening at the moment. All of that within the remit that it's perfect. It makes perfect scholarly sense to say that your interests are on the relationship between media and interpersonal relationships, things that are felt more on the ground level, because of course the argument is that that's really where media begin to matter. And indeed, one of the things that comment makes is it points to a convergence between media and interpersonal communication that scholars have been fascinated in since the 1950s. So what I'm going to discuss next is how that intervention went.